Started. On your left. Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
The wee ones be with you, Thomas. Good Lord, ride all the way. Godspeed, John Glenn. 5, 4, 3.
Cooper's flight, the first woman flies in space, cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova. In her 48 orbits around the Earth, Tereshkova tallies more flight time in space than all the Mercury astronauts combined.
It was an extraordinary sensation. I had never felt quite like it before. I was free above the planet Earth, and I saw it was rotating majestically below me.
Apollo Saturn launch control, T-minus 3 hours, 4 minutes, 32 seconds, and counting. Right on time as far as the astronaut countdown is concerned. The prime crew now departing from their crew quarters.
lights on. 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow.
Stand
4
by for
forward.
30.
At 4 forward, drifting to the right a little.
30. 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Forward, just contact light. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Buzz is erecting the solar wind experiment now.
Surface. So this, Bruce, look okay? Roger, that's a good sight. There you go. Yeah. Beautiful, babe.
Three, two, engine sequence start. 1, 0, launch commit. We have a liftoff. All engines building up thrust. Moving out. Clear the tower.
Roger, tower clear.
5 meters distance.
3 meters.
3 meters.
13 meters.
1 meter. Contact. Capture. We also have capture.
Docking completed. Docking is completed, Houston. Roger. Well done, Tom. It was a good show. They are looking forward now to second hand with you in both Soyuz. Здравствуйте. Got it. It'll stay open. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom. Alex. Glad to see you. Here. Здравствуйте, Алексей. Очень рад видеть вас. Очень рад. Это роща день. Советский Союз, Соединенных Штатов.
New possibilities are opening up for fruitful development of scientific cooperation between countries and the peoples in the interests of peace and progress of all humanity. I wish you successful completion of the planned program and a safe return to Earth. Leonid Brezhnev.
Let me call to express my very great admiration for your hard work, your total dedication in preparing for this first joint flight.
It's taken us many years to open this door to useful cooperation in space between our two countries. And I'm confident that the day is not far off when space missions made possible
by this first joint effort will be more or less commonplace.
And may I say, in signing off,
here's to a soft landing.
Mir, Discovery.
Discovery for Velocia.
Our spaceships closer together. We are bringing our nations closer together. The next time we approach, we will shake your hand, and together we will lead our world into the next millennium. Как мы сблизили наши космические корабли, так мы сблизили наши нации. В следующий раз, когда мы встретимся, мы пожмем друг другу руки и вместе войдем в следующее тысячелетие.
Two, one. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery on a bold new era of spaceflight between the United States and Russia.
Somebody
Spokojnej 2-1, and we have launch of the Mir 18 mission. Cosmonaut Norm Thagard that is making his first ride into space.
We're having no trouble working together. The language has come along fine, and at this point I wouldn't say that's a big barrier. I think we can do it, and indeed, given the cost of these projects these days, I think that's what we will do in the future, both for a space station and probably further exploration of the moon and the planets.
Houston, Atlantis, we have capture.
Copy, capture. Congratulations, Space Shuttle Atlantis, Space Station Mir. After 20 years, our spacecraft are docked in orbit again. Our new era of space exploration has begun.
Houston, Atlantis, we agree. It's a great feeling to be here. It's a
a massive team effort, and many people have pulled together to make this happen. We're lucky and we're honored and privileged to be part of this. It's great to be back joined in orbit again.
We moved into 30 feet and held for 5 minutes, waiting for the timing to get exactly right. It was our objective in the course of the rendezvous not to have to fire any braking pulses towards the mirror, and we were able to work the timeliness, the closure rates, and the distances such that that worked out just fine. We were able to utilize natural orbital braking to bring us all the way into docking and never did have to fire a braking pulse all the way in. This is the actual moment of docking as seen from the aft flight deck from one of the payload bay cameras looking out. And this is a shot that came down to the ground that showed both the centerline camera view as well as the view out the aft flight deck.
The Soyuz undocks from the mirror on the opposite end of the station and begins its fly around. Anatoly flew out of plane here as you see him moving between the panels to a position about 60-80 meters to the commander's side of the orbiter, I guess the port side, and station kept there while we prepared to do our undocking.
You can see some of the jet firings here as he was holding attitude just right out the window. We felt like we could reach out and touch him.
Atlantis, Moscow, and Houston are go for separation.
Great, Dave, thank you. We copy go for separation.
This is a view from the Soyuz looking at us as we do that undocking.
You're also seeing on the left there the Soyuz redocking. You can just see it start to close in there. Anatoly did an excellent job. I was in the commander's seat and he flew from the port side to the starboard side of the vehicle and did a very smooth redocking.
Mirror Discovery.
Discovery for Velocia.
Our spaceships closer together. We are bringing our nations closer together. The next time we approach, we will shake your hand, and together we will lead our world into the next millennium. Как мы сблизили наши космические корабли, так мы сблизили наши нации. В следующий раз, когда мы встретимся, мы пожмем друг другу руки и вместе войдем в следующее тысячелетие.
Two, one, booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery on a bold new era of spaceflight between the United States and Russia.
Somebody
Spokojnej nocy, малыши. 2-1, and we have launch of the Mir 18 mission. Astronaut cosmonaut Norm Thagard that is making his first ride into space.
We're having no trouble working together. The language has come along fine, and at this point I wouldn't say that's a big bear. I think we can do it, and indeed, given the cost of these projects these days, I think that's what we will do in the future, both for a space station and probably further exploration of the moon and the planets. Houston, Atlantis, we have capture.
Copy, capture. Congratulations, Space Shuttle Atlantis, Space Station Mir. After 20 years, our spacecraft are docked in orbit again. Our new era of space exploration has begun.
Houston, Atlantis, we agree. It's a great feeling to be here. It's a massive team effort, and many people have pulled together to make this happen. We're lucky and we're honored and privileged to be part of this. It's great to be back joined in orbit again.
We moved into 30 feet and held for 5 minutes, waiting for the timing to get exactly right. It was our objective in the course of the rendezvous not to have to fire any braking pulses towards the mirror, and we were able to work the timeliness, the closure rates, and the distances such that that worked out just fine. We were able to utilize natural orbital braking to bring us all the way into docking and never did have to fire a braking pulse all the way in. This is the actual moment of docking as seen from the aft flight deck from one of the payload bay cameras looking out. And this is a shot that came down to the ground that showed both the centerline camera view as well as the view out the aft flight deck.
The Soyuz undocks from the Mir on the opposite end of the station and begins its fly around. Anatoly flew out of plane here as you see him moving between the panels to a position about 60-80 meters to the commander's side of the orbiter, I guess the port side, and station kept there while we prepared to do our undocking.
You can see some of the jet firings here as he was holding attitude just right out the window. We felt like we could reach out and touch him.
Atlantis, Moscow, and Houston are go for separation.
Great, Dave, thank you. We copy go for separation.
This is a view from the Soyuz looking at us as we do that undocking.
You're also seeing on the left there the Soyuz redocking. You can just see it start to close in there. Anatoly did an excellent job. I was in the commander's seat, and he flew from the port side to the starboard side of the vehicle and did a very smooth redocking.
One of the first orders of business was to assemble the docking module in the bay. And that involved using the Canadarm to install this large 5-ton Russian docking module onto the top of the orbiter docking station here in preparation for attaching it to Mir. But we got it carefully in position within about fractions of an inch and fractions of a degree, and then Ken fired the thrusters and slammed the two mechanisms home, and the mechanism just worked perfectly to lock them together.
I think this is where you see that all the training and teamwork really come into play, because everybody was doing all the things we've been trained to do. We were working very closely, and we were able to bring these two pieces of Russian hardware together on orbit 215 miles up, exactly where the Russians wanted them. And as you'll see from the outside view, the whole operation proceeded very gradually. There in the lower right, you can see the view if you were sitting out on the left wingtip as these two parts come together.
This is looking out the ODS centerline up at the Mir as we're approaching from underneath. This is the Mir view, what they saw as they were looking down at the Space Shuttle Atlantis passing over the Earth. This is a view of the Mir space station as we passed from across the terminator from sunlit portion of the planet to the backside. This is the end game here. This is where it all comes together and hitting those critical docking parameters. The target, of course, is shown on the right on this split screen image. We really did get that jostle as we made contact and had the post-contact thrusting firing.
Here's a view of the initial hatch opening from the Russian side, of course. And you're going to see a couple happy faces here between Yuri Oniforenko and Kevin Chilton. Tremendous relief once you get there and you join up and realize that it's an excellent place to be. There's some good work going on up there, and felt like home for Shannon already. And of course, Shannon, she felt at home the minute she got there, and they put her right to work. She was one of the experts in the transfer activities. And here you see the gift exchange. So some of the gifts that we gave them were space books for their children, and it brought tears to their eyes.
Our first job was to install some clamps on the handrails to deploy the experiment packages later. And then our task was to move to a camera to remove it on the docking module. And this was used on STS-74 when they docked with Mir. And then when they left the docking module there, the camera was left there also. So one of our tasks was to remove it and bring it back to Earth. And here you see Rich, he's translating with the camera itself, which is rather large, and he was being very careful of that as he shepherded it back to the tunnel adapter where he stowed it temporarily back inside till we were finished with the EVA.
Here you see Linda and myself removing one of the 4 MEEP containers for installation onto some clamps on the docking module. We tested out some new tools and equipment for use on the ultimate International Space Station, the rigid tether and the multiple use tether, which we use to transport the MEEPs to their work site and install them into the clamps. Here you're going to see one of those activities. And then one of the funnest things that Linda and I had to do were the deployment of the MEEPs, and you're going to see that here. It's so much easier to do up there. You just give it a little flick and it flies around. It all worked well, and we deployed this one here is MEEP number 4, I believe. The MEEP experiments are orbital debris sensors and passive samplers.
And this is the farewell ceremony, and I think I can speak for the rest of the crew. Certainly for me, it was the most emotion-filled moment that I'd had in orbit in 2 missions. Of course, saying goodbye to Shannon, there's Chile giving her a hug and wishing her well for her long stay up there until STS-79 goes back to pick her up. On undock day, we, again, were very busy on that day, similarly to the docking day. The initial separation burn, a couple of low Z pulses out to get going. And as we continued to fly out, we assumed a range of 450 to 550 feet targeted to conduct this fly around of the Mir.
This is in Cristal. You can see that there's lots of ventilation tubes, there's lots of wires, there's lots of equipment that's stored there, and there's a bungee cord that sort of helps you navigate back and forth. This is Perota, the new module that came while I was there, and it's full of various scientific equipment. As you can see, there's the glove box, and it just worked outstanding. Actually, all the United States equipment that was there in Perota worked really, really well. Now, this is the node, and everything joins up here. And after Perota came and then after Progress came, Yuri pointed out to me that for the first time in the history of the station of Mir, all the nodes were occupied, and that was a new record. This is in the base block, and you can see the table back there. Valeri's back there by the table. The table was sort of the central place in Mir, and that's where if you weren't working somewhere else, you sort of congregated there to talk to the ground, eat, and do all the various activities that you'd have. The cosmonauts each had a small cabin on each side, which was very nice. They could keep their personal things there, and then they had a little window that they could look out. This is Inspector. John has just moved in. It was all nice and clean and all picked up, but then all the new stuff got in there. And you can see I like to read, and I had lots of books. I put them in a bookcase up there about halfway through the flight, and Yuri came in and he looked and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I like to have my books out. I like to look at it. It makes me feel good."
And this is Shannon in the docking module.
waiting expectantly for our hatch to open here, and Bill is doing that right now. So Bill goes to shake Valeri's hand and gets brought into the docking module. Here's John and Shannon. Glad to be together again. And Shannon had the traditional greeting of bread and salt. It's a traditional Russian greeting, and we celebrated together.
We got quite a bit of the transfer operations done that first day. For the first time, powered transfers, where we had scientific experiments under power on shuttle that we powered down and then moved over to Mir. This is Jay. It's one of two incubators that keep a controlled temperature environment for several different varieties of samples in those. Took it over to the new module on Mir, Peroda, and inserted it in a locker and powered it up. And one of the final transfer items, which Carl mentioned, was the 350 pounds of Russian food we had in the Eris experiment.
Six, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Capture light. Yes, Ksenia. Capture. Yes, low Z, free drift.
I've got a flashing ring align on and off, John Rocks.
Okay, I've got ring align on.
Ring align.
Okay, they've settled 50-50-50. PCT's off, flight control power. Damping is on.
Counting to the minute.
Flight control power is off. No, we gotta wait until damping's off.
No, I'm counting to the minute for the power.
Okay, that's fine.
We have cap.
Nice job, Biggs.
All right, beautiful, Biggs.
Again, an emotional time. Everybody, was trying to make sure that we had everything that belonged on the orbiter side on that side, and everything that belonged on Mir on that side. Jerry, of course, had kind of gotten used to his surroundings by now, and John and Jerry spent a lot of time talking, trying to get Jerry up to speed and make sure that he knew where everything was that he needed. And we finally said our final goodbyes and closed the hatch the night before we undocked.
Once the fire broke out, back behind me, the master alarm went off, of course. The smoke filled the station. It was readily apparent that there was indeed a fire. We immediately started fighting that fire, so everyone immediately went to the ventilation, the oxygen ventilators, and they worked very good, and they protected us. Afterwards, of course, being a physician, I was very concerned with crew health. We set up a station for any respiratory problems that might take place. We had all the emergency gear in place, and from my assessment, I don't see where anyone had any serious inhalation damage, and it was due to good action on the crew to get into the oxygen mask quickly. Once the fire broke out, back behind me, the master alarm went off, of course. The smoke filled the station. It was readily apparent that there was indeed a fire. We immediately started fighting that fire, so everyone immediately went to the ventilation, the oxygen ventilators, and they worked very good, and they protected us. Afterwards, of course, being a physician, I was very concerned with crew health. We set up a station for any respiratory problems that might take place. We had all the emergency gear in place, and from my assessment, I don't see where anyone had any serious inhalation damage, and it was due to good action on the crew to get into the oxygen mask quickly.
It's great to do things together with our Russian colleagues now, and we actually tested out a brand new suit. It was the first time that space suit was ever used in space, and so we had a great spacewalk together and good cooperative spirit going. Look, I'll tell you, that spacewalk, the whole time it felt like I was falling from the edge of a cliff, and not only falling from the cliff, but the cliff itself, being the space station, was falling the whole time. And so it was a remarkable feeling, and you had to keep yourself under control and talk yourself into saying it's okay to be falling. And seeing the spectacular view of the Earth and the big space station sprawling, all that was just fantastic. So that's probably the memory I'm going to take home the most.
2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, maintaining America's constant presence in space.
Houston now controlling the flight of Atlantis.
And you can see the sun was just about to come up and rise over the OMS pod as we contacted. So this is all silhouetted here, but we make a very soft contact there. Everything went smoothly on the pressure checks, so we had the opportunity to open the hatch right away and get a good view of our colleagues on the other side.
Elena brought in traditional black bread, salt, and tea. There's Vasily. Here you'll see Jerry for the first time, and just look at that smile on his face.
The second evening on the dock phase, we had an international meal with food from all the countries represented by the crew. We had food from Russia, America, Peru, China. We had, of course, food from France with foie gras and confit. Here, goat cheese. And we had barbecue from... we had barbecue from Pitties, dehydrated. And for 3 hours, the ground never called us, and we had a very good time in the morning. Here you see a chocolate gift from ESA with the logo of the different partners in the International Space Station program.
All kinds of food down here on the table.
As you can see, the chocolate shuttles flying around. Eileen thinks that some of them may be stuck somewhere behind panels there.
The fire was basically in this region here, with the flame shooting across this way. And therefore, as you can see where the camera is basically where I was at, and we had one other body in front of me. I was passing the fire extinguisher, but we can only get one person in here to fight the fire because of the flame location. And at that time, the other Soyuz was on the other side where Progress is now docked. So as you can see, it would have been very difficult to get through the flame itself to get to the one of the rescue vehicles. And it was very difficult to fight the fire because you could only get one body close enough to the fire itself.
As you all know, John and Shannon worked quite a lot with the greenhouse. It's called Svet in Russian, and I'm going to be working with this on this with Sasha Lazutkin. As I say, we're doing a seed-to-seed experiment, which has never been done before in space. So when Mike's doing this experiment with Sasha, they're going to be stacked up like this a lot of times, and a lot of old gear, and that's why we really appreciate all the efforts of the people on the ground to get gear out of gear.
When we thought there was a collision imminent, the thought in our minds was we are going to have to bail out. And I was the first one to go per the procedures to the Soyuz, and there I waited. Then, as it became apparent that it wasn't a devastating puncture of the hull of Spectre module, and that we had time to work and try and isolate it, then I came out of the Soyuz, understood implicitly that we were not going to be abandoning quite yet. And we then proceeded to work together, I with Sasha Lazutkin, to clear cables and hold a hatch in place over that module's entranceway. We had about 24 minutes of what we call reserve time before we had to be in the Soyuz if we hadn't isolated the leak. And so once we'd determined that time, and Vasily, the commander, had done that, we knew that we had some time to think carefully, clearly, what we were doing and work through the problems of sealing off the leak in the hatch.
The biggest picture in all of this is that we did lose a module out of this event, which was the Spectre module. There's a chance that power may be restored to that module in the next few months, and that quite a lot of American life science equipment was left in that module along with my personal effects. Since then, I've managed to find myself a toothbrush and toothpaste and clothes and even a pair of shoes to run with. So life is getting back to normal for me as far as just everyday living.
This is our friend that we brought up on the Progress. It's going to be used to seal off, to allow the pass-through of the umbilicals from the module Spectre. And this is going to attach onto the module Spectre, onto the end cone. Imagine Spectre stretching off this way to the side, and on the inside of the node, there will be accessible to us under normal pressure, these connectors. But what Vasily and Sasha are going to do is on the backside, there will already have been stuck some cables, like a kind of Medusa of cables. And then during the EVA, Vasily and Sasha will connect to these cables, the power cables that are now floating free in Spectre that would provide the means to get the power from Spectre to the base block.
This flight was a flight where there was a high degree of congressional interest because of the risk. There were questions about the Russian Mir space station that had the fire. Previously, they had the collision. And then a couple of days before liftoff, the Mir experienced another attitude control computer failure, and so they lost attitude control. So there were a lot of questions that we had to answer prior to liftoff regarding whether or not it was safe to go up to Mir. Colonel Titov, Russian cosmonaut, flew in our spacesuit, and Scott Perezinski, and Volodya, as we call him, stepped outside to recover some experiments outside the Mir space station. And here's Scott coming with his miner's helmet, the lamp that looks like a miner, used to be seen in the darkness. You see the large gray suitcase-like device attached to Scott is the experiment that one of 4 different suitcase devices that we brought back down to study the effects of space. At the end of the spacewalk, Scott and Volodya came back in to the shuttle and closed the hatch for the end of about a 6 or 7 hour very productive EVA.
We will be bringing back some scientific instruments indoors that are measuring the effects of long duration exposure to the harsh environment of space to help us learn how to build the coatings on the outside of our next space station, windows, and various detectors.
We met our mission objectives, in many cases exceeded them in the areas of technical operations of the space station, repairs of the space station, and the scientific research of the space station. And part of what we're learning is how to join those 3 areas simultaneously, station ops, research, and basic living, and do these in an effective manner.
2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, continuing the union of U.S. and Russian space endeavors.
Booster Endeavour, roll program.
Roger, roll Endeavour.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is complete. Endeavour is now in a heads-down, wings-level position, headed to a rendezvous with the Mir space station.
This is a view of the orbiter from Mir, and you can see clearly some jets firing as we close. We rendezvoused at night, and this works out to be a lot better for visibility. This is Dave's view.
It's a real pleasure watching you guys come out of the sky.
And the actual docking itself.
Endeavour Houston for Andy. What's it look like?
It's an impressive sight, actually. It's just amazing. It's been described as a big mosquito or dragonfly, and it's right. It's got all kinds of wings on it. It's an incredible sight.
This is Mission Control, Houston. Hatch opening and a first greeting between Mir 24 Commander Anatoly Solovyev and Mir STS-89 Commander Terry Wilcott.
Thanks for coming to get me. Although I could have lived fine a lot longer, psychologically, physically, but there's a lot of fun and good business to be done on Earth. It's time to go back, I think, and hand the ball over to Andy. He's very capable and should enjoy this.
Here we are in the Cristal module, and you see the air hoses that provide ventilation very important in zero gravity not to have dead spots, and we can reroute these hoses as necessary to change the airflow depending where the hot and cold spots are in the vehicle. That's a yellow oxygen tank we just saw on the left. There's a spacesuit on the right. This is a storage area, and you can see that we have to transfer all the 9,000 items down this corridor to get into the rest of the Mir space station. It's not very wide. There's the area I slept in above. We pull ourselves with sets of these bungees. You see that black bungee on the top. So we have prepared this area before the shuttle docked and cleared it. It's actually much more crowded than this during actual life. Storage lockers on the left, panels on the right. There are systems and storage behind all these panels. There's the treadmill above. That's really the floor. You might say we were upside down. We're approaching the node, the main node to which all the modules, 6 main sections of the station are attached. Now we're turning, literally turning, rolling into the base block. These modules are attached, so orientation is not necessarily the same in each module. And there's Andy. And we're spending our time transferring information. I'm making sure he knows where things are and giving him the tips I've learned in 4.5 months in space. And here we've turned to the Perota module. It's our main laboratory. It's mostly packed up at this point. I'd spent the last 2 to 3 weeks packing up items. So final preparations. There's the computer, very important as many purposes for a laptop on orbit, including watching videos, which I had some, not much time to watch. But they were interesting as they impacted me strongly as an attachment to Earth. Somehow the movies seemed very important.
Okay, 5 seconds. 0. Grab your tracking. Thanks.
Hey, Autobird.
They've got us closing 08 and 257. Still shooting the
Houston Endeavor, physical separation, executing SEP burn.
И понимаем, какие надо совершить действия. И эти действия дальше изложены.
We've learned a lot of things. We've learned a lot of technical things like how to bring the shuttle up to a space station, how to dock, how to transfer supplies, how to perform all those technical functions you need to support an operating space station. We've also learned some very important things about how to work together in a spirit of cooperation, how to understand each other and understand the programmatic requirements that each side has and issues like that. Of course, we've learned how to live and operate and function on a day-to-day basis in an orbiting laboratory such as this space station.
Of course, one of our primary objectives was to rendezvous and dock with the Mir space station and return Andy Thomas from the final increment of Americans being on board the Mir space station as part of Phase 1. And of course, it's a great time for Andy and the Russians because they're welcoming us on board as you would any guest into your home, and they haven't seen guests in a long time. And Andy's ready to come home. He's really happy. He's had a long, arduous mission, very successful one at that. And it's just a great reunion of friends and enjoying the success of a lot of work in space, especially this crew that was there for so long.
Wendy Lawrence was in charge of this transfer process, which is a very large job. It had, as I said, thousands of pounds of materials that had to be transferred from the shuttle and then back from the Mir to the shuttle.
It seemed like we had just gotten to the Mir when it was time to say goodbye, and we had some gifts from the Mir crew to us and some to them, of course. We had some documents that have the signatures from all the astronauts and cosmonauts that have been involved with the Phase 1 program that we signed. And then you can see the hesitation by by the Mir crew to finally close the hatch. They wanted us to stay at seam, and we're feeling some sadness to close that hatch for the last time and say goodbye to Andy.
Yeah, the last docking mission for the shuttle with the Mir, somewhat nostalgic now looking back on it, that what was a very, very successful program is completed, and we'll be leaping off into the new International Space Station.
Well, after the Progress resupply vehicle collided with Spectre, it became apparent to both the Russians and the Americans that if Spectre were to be repaired, it would have to be done through a significant number of external spacewalks and possibly internal spacewalks as well. And so it made a lot of sense operationally to have 3 crew members on board who all fit and were qualified in the operation of the Russian spacesuit. As part of my waiver to train for a flight on board Mir, the letter that Valery Ryumin signed stated up front that I could start the training contingent upon me never being slated for a spacewalk, because it was clear to everybody involved, myself included, that I really did not fit the Russian spacesuit well enough to go out and do a spacewalk. And so the decision was made in late July of '97 to replace me with my backup, Dave Wolf.
Of course, like all of you, I'm here to say welcome home to Shannon Lucid. There's so many things to say about the incredible skill and stamina and dedication it takes to be in space for 6 months. Her achievements, the longest single flight by an American in space, the longest duration for any woman in space, 5 shuttle missions now for her. It's a monument to the human spirit. She has also set a remarkable example for a new generation of young Americans.
People may look critically at some of the problems on the Mir, the fire, the collision. Those things have had tremendous benefit from us in terms of understanding not only the causes, but also the corrective action, and ensuring that we're able to apply those to the International Space Station. So clearly that has tremendous value to us. And from a working relationship, having worked through those difficulties together has created a significant bond between the Russian and American team in Phase 1, and that relationship and confidence in one another, understanding and trust has certainly not been limited just to Phase 1. It has flowed over into the International Space Station, and our working relationship with our Russian counterparts in the International Space Station has dramatically benefited from not necessarily the problems, but having overcome those difficulties together.
It's not the end, it's just the start of a new phase. And as you were talking about it, I thought about the symbolism here. The flag of our country is hundreds of years old. This wrench is a space tool which is tens of years old. And this disc is new technology which is years old. So we go from hundreds to tens to single digits. And I'd like to give this to Frank, because these are going to be items that we're going to remember, but we're going to have new things happening. And this is all symbolic because we're moving ahead, we're not moving backwards. And it's also symbolic of the incredible change we've had in our world, where when we started out we didn't know each other, and now we really know the Russians, and we know with certainty that we're going to open up the universe to benefit life on this planet.
I think the important thing is that we know enough now to begin ISS and have confidence that we can do it safely and do it effectively. Whereas before, if we had just, say, one mission to the Mir and then tried to extrapolate from that into how we were going to operate on ISS, I think we would have learned some lessons the hard way, and probably more expensively than we might otherwise. I think the events that occurred in 1997, the fire, the collision, the systems problems on board, I think were part of the character building of the program that we didn't anticipate. They were part of the forcing together of the two sides to work together on problems and solve them that we thought might happen in one way or another, but had no idea what the details might be. And I believe that we've gone much further in phase one than we thought we would in terms of building a partnership and building trust than we might have otherwise. I think we were well on our way to a good program, but I believe these things forced us to drop the facade, if you will, or drop the good face you put on a lot of things to deal with the real problems underneath, and to look more closely at each other on how we do operate and what the infrastructure is like, where the real problems are deeper into the system than we might have had access to otherwise. On the technical side, we forced each side to look at how we do business from a technical standpoint, how we conduct operations, how we plan, and to set up the communication links that allow us to do it together and to communicate how we do it in many different levels. I think on the human side, we gained a better understanding of where we're coming from, you know, what the foundation of our beliefs are in terms of why we explore, why we go into space, why we're willing to expend the resources on these things. It's not identical between the two countries, but there are some similarities that were startling to some people. By the same token, on the human side, I believe we found out that at the human level we are very similar, we and the Russians. They put a great deal of stake in family values, for instance, and in individual worth at an individual level. But they have a little different way of looking at things at an organizational level than we do. And so we are learning to correlate what seems to be similar with what seems to be different. With the shuttle, we come back, we regroup, we put it in the hangar, we retrain the crew, we work on the problems on the shuttle. It's easy when you've got it on the ground to relax a little bit and say, okay, we'll take care of the problems before the next launch and make a conscious decision before we do the next big event. On something like a station, you've got it going on all the time. If a problem occurred, you've got to really make it a twofold solution. One is it safe now and are we doing okay? And then the other one is how do we fix it so it never reoccurs in the future or that the impact is minimized? And we've learned that we have to take that approach to any problem that occurs or any situation. Plus, you never can forget that you've got somebody on orbit.
Радиостанция не делает. Найди.
О, у меня снег. Наверх, посмотрите наверх.
Не надо. Ничего. Uh-oh.
Usually down here on your days off. You guys have a house up there today?
Нет, только через них.
Okay, item 19. You ready?
We're 35 feet opening at .02. Degrees up.
Okay, I've got 74 feet. Okay, 106 feet, closing .2. Here, because we wanted to decay to .1 anyway. Have you put those Y's in yet? Not yet. That's
I want to probably see you better from that seat over there.
That's the camera, isn't it?
No, that up top, but what is this?
Well, it looks like that.
Is
What
that
you're
the-
seeing is just the lens, and it goes back into the body.
Приемник.
Oh, there.
Вот он,
Behind
видите?
it. Should be yellow.
Вот это вот желтые.
No.
А.
Yeah. So where was the sound off?
On our electricity
No,
system.
I know the sound off. Where did it go?
Well, so you go.
So we're going to come over here. Yeah, Lucha, yes.
All right. Let's find
Okay,
the
so that's a
7.
flow
Okay,
off.
I'll remember
Okay,
7.
Good, good.
okay.
Okay, so you had 25% left, and you did that in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Pretty quick.
So let us know when you want the recycling shot, Tricia.
The what?
The recycling shot.
Do you want me to just translate up the docu module, or?
Why don't you keep translating after like you're
Okay. Looks like a throw. Oh.
Yeah, it looks like you're going pretty quickly.
Did you swim in college or just high school?
Both. Well, AAU mostly instead of high school.
Than try to get themselves in trouble here.
Okay, we're just trying to cover all the bases.
I understand. I think that's a good plan. I just want to make sure.
We had a problem. We got to tell them. Whatever you do, get it. Tell them whatever that is.
CDR, this is the launch director. We wish you well. Looks like everything is coming together here, and we're going to pick up the count here in about 30 seconds.
Space Station History. The first recorded ideas for a space station surfaced in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It all seemed fanciful at the time. Humans living and working in space. Who would believe it? The 1950s. The space age has become a reality. Rocket scientist Wernher von Braun visualizes a wheel-shaped space station. Is this the shape of things to come? 1971. Russia launches the first space station, the Salyut 1. Space stations become a reality as cosmonauts live and work on board the craft. 1973. The United States launches its first space station, Skylab. Inside, astronauts conduct scientific experiments, study the Earth, and learn about the effects of weightlessness on the human body in space. 1986. Russia begins assembly on the space station Mir. Records are broken for long-term stays in space, and scientific research in orbit continues. 1995. The United States teams up with Russia, docking the space shuttle with the Mir for the first time, starting a new era of cooperation to prepare for the International Space Station.